My great-uncle Henry Lucas was born June 29, 1993, in Wilmington, North Carolina. His mother was a school teacher for all grades, and his father owned a service station in North Carolina. 16 months after he was born, his little brother Samuel Lucas came into the family. Henry attended a segregated all-white school throughout his elementary, junior, and high school years. Henry's earliest memory of war was listening to the radio and hearing about the bombing at Pearl Harbor. His parents told him the United States were going to war. Henry was very patriotic and wanted to support his country. His family was not very rich and could not pay for college. However, Henry applied for a Navy scholarship program called NROTC, which paid for all of his tuition. He got the scholarship and immediately began his college years at Duke University. Henry graduated Duke as a political science major and economics minor. He was then commissioned on January 31, 1955, which was the last day of the Korean War. Even though he saw no combat, he was named a Korean War veteran. Henry was allowed to choose which part of the Navy he wanted to join. His options were submarine, battleship, or jet fighter. He chose jet fighter and started his training immediately in Pensacola, Florida. The men at training could not leave the base, so for fun they listened to the radio and watched Saturday morning cartoons in a big lecture hall that cost them 9 cents a ticket to see. After basic training, Henry received his Wings of Gold and was assigned to VF-122, a night fighter squadron in San Diego, California. There they received the new V-3H-2N Demon planes. However, these planes were an ensign killer. 11 crashed during testing and 7 pilots had been killed. Henry's best friend crashed during a gunnery training, and Henry had to escort his body back to Buffalo, New York. He said this was the saddest moment in his life. The plane proved to be unacceptable as an all-weather interceptor because it was underpowered and iced up above the freezing level, causing flameouts. Henry's squadron was eventually offloaded from the carrier and spent 3 months at NAS Kubi Point in the Philippines. At this time, Henry decided to resign his commission in the regular Navy and accept his reserve commission so he could go graduate business school. Henry then returned to Hickory, North Carolina, where he met his first wife, Melissa Thomas, who was the older sister of his little brother's wife. They packed up everything they had and moved to California, where Henry attended Stanford University Graduate School of Business. Melissa and Henry eventually had 4 kids: Charlie, Susan, Thomas, and Joseph. I have not met any of these cousins, however. The biggest moment in Henry's life was being called up from the reserves to return to active duty during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a transfer of missiles from the Soviet Union to Cuba. This was the moment in the Cold War that came closest to a nuclear conflict. Henry's squadron VS-861 was stationed at NAS Norfolk, Virginia. They were deployed to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. They flew S-2F trackers, an anti-submarine carrier-based plane. In Cuba, Henry spent 2 months patrolling, monitoring, and photographing Russian vessels bringing missiles into Cuba. After the crisis was over, Henry was released from active duty for a second time. He retired from the Navy after 21 years and was a lieutenant commander. He moved with his wife and 4 kids to Raleigh, North Carolina, where he worked for Wachovia Bank. Henry worked long hours and was not home much. His mother passed away at the age of 87, and on the day Henry got back from the funeral, he found divorce papers waiting for him on the kitchen counter. His wife had filed for divorce, with the reason being irreconcilable breakdown of marriage. 7 years later, he met my Aunt Anita at the age of 55. After 2 years of dating, they were married at Hawaii on Henry's birthday. They live in Southington, Connecticut now, near my grandparents. Because they got married at an older age, they had no children between them. In 2007, Henry was diagnosed with prostate cancer. His treatment consisted of 38 treatments of external beam radiation as well as hormone medication. These were successful, and his semi-annual follow-up shows that he has beat cancer. Henry and Anita have been married for 24 years. They spend most of their time with my cousins and grandparents who live very close to them. 2 of Henry's sons joined the Peace Corps and are now stationed in Haiti and Ghana. Henry was elected president of the Odd Fellows Home of Connecticut. He was also elected chaplain of the American Legion Kiltonic Post 72. He had an honor guard help him do services at funerals for their Legionnaire members. Henry now works at AAA teaching driver's education classes. When asked what he wanted to pass along to you guys, He said, "It is important to serve your country, whether it be in battle or in government. This country has fought to keep you free. Shouldn't you do the same?"